They literally, I remember at 8 in the morning, they're like, how are we going to do this? And Jim Doyle's like, well, I really think we should just go out and buy this new material. It's called spandex.
Yeah, the rubber wall that everybody thinks is rubber. I went off down the fabric store and got spandex. So then we just made a panel of it, stuck it over the bed, and pushed on it a couple times, and it was like, this might work. That would be me. That would be my face, is Freddy in that particular shot.
Nancy stirs.
I think that's my hero shot.
Freddy's got to go back.
We didn't know what it would look like. I just said, just press your face against it and press your hand out. And we'll see how it looks. And we looked at it like, whoa, that's really terrific. But, you know, it cost 10 cents.
Of course, the bathtub scene, which is probably people's favorite scene. Just that idea of the claw coming up through the water between my legs while I'm sleeping in the bathtub. How are we going to do this? Well, you're going to be on this little box in the bathtub, and then we're going to have Jim Doyle from underneath who's going to, stick the claw up through the bathwater bubbles. I'm like, okay, you guys have obviously thought about this more than I have.
It wasn't a difficult thing to do. We just cut a hole under the bathtub, cut a hole in the bathtub, sealed a tank below. And action. I just held my breath and just would, duck under the water when Wes said action, and I could hear him because he was right next to the wall, so I could hear him through the wall. And I just took cues from him.
Right, too high.
And had to be really, really, really careful because that was the sharp glove.
And up.
I loathe to admit that's not me between Heather's legs in the tub. That's Jim Doyle again, working 24/7.
No, get up, Jim.
Ready. Okay, Jim, ready? Take your breath.
Are you ready? As soon as he's under, I'll start. Yell action, I guess.
As soon as you're ready, Jim. Action.
Underwater. That was all done at a pool with black plastic sheeting so that you couldn't tell how deep the pool was. It looked like it went forever down there.
We all went under that Viz Queen on scuba equipment. We all thought we were going to drown. We just thought this is the most dangerous thing we've ever done.
There's some props that the special effects guys bring onto the set. I think Wes invents these kinds of things to just get me. I have to get over that, and it usually takes me a couple of minutes.
I was in the lab one day putting the phone together with the mouth and the mechanical tongue. It was a cable-operated tongue device, so he could make it go up or down, left and right, and pull it in and out.
It was just like a simple prop, and all it did was just that.
Then when I saw how it worked, and I saw the line that was going to be read,
I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy.
I knew that would become one of the most famous lines from the movie. It just had all the ingredients of being one of those great movie lines.
The thing I walked away the most from the entire film was that I felt that it was a film about blood. No! It was like every scene was too much blood, not enough blood, the blood's not red enough, the blood's too sticky, the blood's too thin, cue the blood, more blood, less blood, splash the blood. I clearly had read it and interestingly enough not really processed some of the more adventurous things I was going to have to do. One day on the set, a prop guy came up to me and was like, oh, now, just wanted to show you the body bag. And I'm like, all right, like, I don't know why you're showing me. That was awful, being in that body bag. Your psyche does not want to be in that bag. You hear about body bags, you're just not supposed to be in one. Also because I was sharing it with creatures. I had to stand in this bag with these things. It was just awful. I was terrified and grossed out, and I thought, this is just awful. Centipede? Wait, I don't remember reading that in the script. They shot with my face with a rubber centipede, me pushing it out, and then they used the cast face with a real centipede. I don't know what this has to do with acting, and I don't think I want to do this.
The biggest thing in the picture was the revolving room.
The upside-down room that they used with Tina, who was shown to be on the ceiling. I had no idea how they were going to do that when I saw the script. I'm still not absolutely clear how they did do it on production.
It was critical that Tina's death had to be something that was completely otherworldly and completely confusing to the audience. The idea actually came from the Fred Astaire film Royal Wedding, which had a great sequence of him dancing around the rotating room. You can do that? I said, well, I think we can. So I went ahead and looked at the logistics. So, yeah, I think we can do this. We spent a month to get this thing done. Built the framework and then built the room inside of that.
All sorts of superstructure underneath because it had to kind of have a structural integrity no matter what attitude it was in.
Floors, walls, ceiling, everything is framed in 2x6s and double layer plywood because nothing can move. Every little thing had to be reconsidered. What are the decorations in the room? How are we going to nail them down when the room turns?
Everything in the room, all the curtains, anything that would flop or move was just starched to hell or pinned down. We strapped Amanda's boyfriend down to the floor. We had his hair totally lacquered. And then there were two kind of jump seats that were bolted to the wall, and the camera was bolted to the wall.
The cameraman had himself strapped into a chair, and he kept the camera on, and he went around with the room.
We turned the room by hand, me and 3 or 4 guys. It was very spooky when it was turning all by itself.
It was horrifying. I mean, it was the only scene I think I've ever been part of that was more frightening in real life. What if it falls off its hinges? Or what if somebody falls out of the hole and lands on the ground? It just seemed like so much could go wrong.
I was pretty scared going into that. I was afraid for my own physical safety because I kept thinking things were going to fall on me. I thought I was going to fall out. This has a lot of elements to it that seem really dangerous.
We shot the whole sequence and just dragged Amanda up the wall. It just was the spookiest thing in the world. The only thing was, as soon as anybody walked into the room, they got totally nauseous because it was so disorienting.
I look up and there's the bed above me. Completely freak out. I get complete and utter vertigo and I start to feel that I'm falling. Wes's head comes through this hole in the floor and he's like, look, I am standing on the floor. This is my head. You're on the floor. You're looking right at me.
Amanda, this is down, this is up, this is down, this is up, just before the take.
And action.
No! Just the most bizarre thing I've ever been asked to do. No! It was a mess doing the whole thing.
And then we took the same room and used it as Johnny Depp's room for the bed sequence. Part pulling him down through the bed was easy, but then when the mother comes in and sees all the blood come out, we inverted the room.
It's actually inspired by Kubrick a little bit, because The Shining had come out, and there was that scene with the blood spilling out of the elevators.
And I thought if you could get away with it, I could.
Roughly 220 gallons of the blood, as we called it. This was actually made with water, with food coloring and a little bit of poster paint to make it thick. It was stored on a scaffolding above the stage.
Imagine it's like a lottery drum. And there's a platform with guys waiting at the top. The drum turns, and when it hits the mark, boom, and that's the bed.
Nobody could see anything because the room was all closed. All we could hear was this thunderous pounding on the floor, which was now the ceiling, of all this blood dumping into the room. It was probably about 30 of the most exciting seconds I've had on a film set.
The stunt coordinator was Tony Caesar. He did some really hard falls. There's a scene where Freddy gets knocked by the sledgehammer and falls backward over the railing. I thought he had broken his neck for sure because his body rotated and he just turned his head sideways for a split second and hit that thing like a ton of bricks. The whole plywood, which was like 3/4 inch plywood, was cracked.
His specialty was burn scenes, where he would paint his body with flament and light himself.
This guy was supposedly one of the top body burn guys in the business. This guy's nuts. He's good. He knows what he's doing.
He did what he said was the longest fire burn done to that time when Freddy was caught on fire in the basement, runs up the stairs.
I couldn't believe this guy was actually doing this. It's nuts. We're sitting there with the fire extinguishers. When is he going to stop? He rolls back down the stairs on fire. Nobody'd ever done that before. Gets up, starts back up the stairs. And we're like, okay. Finally, he went down, hot enough, and we put him out.
They put him out and he stood up and said, how'd it go? So he was pretty amazing.
At the end, as we were finally winding down, and I'm sure the money was running out, there were some days where there were some extra people on the set kind of looking at us, and I got the sense like, okay, these must be money people, and they must be nervous that we're not done yet.
In the middle of all of this, I was talking to Wes and asking him how it was going, and he was telling me about the shortage of time and money and so on, and I volunteered to come in and try to shoot second unit to pick up shots, and I said, look, just tell me what you need, and I'll go try to get the shots. You'd work for 12 or 14 or 15 hours, and you wouldn't get everything that was on the call sheet.
My day-to-day concerns were keeping people working. We had growing discontent with the crew because we were falling behind.
I asked Bob, what do I do? I've never produced before. I've never represented a studio on a production. Bob said, just keep pacing back and forth, looking at your watch, and sign.
One day, we were doing an inside scene where I was running through the alley and I'm being pursued by Freddy. Cut my foot open. And I remember Bob Shea going like, do you really have to go to the hospital and get stitches? I'm like, I think I do. Oh, this actress, God. So what? Her foot is bleeding a little bit.
The scene where Heather puts her foot in the carpet and it sinks through. That was one of my dreams, one of the horrible dreams that I had when I was a kid.
Wes said, okay, Bob, this is your idea. If you think it's so great, why don't you direct this scene?
Yeah, well, no, it was one of the times that Bob visited the set, and it was towards the end, very, very end of the shoot, and I think it was about the time he was getting ready to pull the plug. Bob was standing right behind me saying, you got to shoot, you can't do that, cut this scene. I said, Bob, why don't you direct it?
Wes Dane